This story doesn't begin with a fight. It begins with a dinner, a quiet table, polite smiles, a language no one thought mattered, and a sentence that once heard can never be unheard. Sometimes the deepest betrayal isn't loud. It doesn't come with slammed doors or raised voices. It comes calmly, spoken to someone else, in a way that makes us realize how we've been seen all along. In that moment, the pain isn't just what's said. It's the understanding that something has been shrinking inside us for a long time and we finally see it clearly. This isn't a story about punishment or taking sides. It's about that instant when the room keeps moving, the conversation goes on, and inside everything freezes. When we're forced to ask ourselves a hard question, how much of who we are did we silence just to belong? Let's step into this story with a little quiet and a little honesty, because sometimes what breaks us open is also what finally wakes us up. My name is Dash Holloway, and I've carried this like a bruise you can't show anyone. I'm going to tell you what happened that night, what I found afterward, and how a language I learned in silence became the one thing that saved me. But before I share my story, I want to know you're here with me. Just say listening in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And if you can hit subscribe, because I'm not telling this for drama. I'm telling it because there are people out there living inside a marriage where they feel invisible, and I don't want you to go through that alone. Thank you. And now let me tell you everything. My life didn't blow up in a courtroom or a screaming match. It started in a mirror. Chicago Fall, Lincoln Park, the kind of cold that sneaks under the window frames and lives in the walls. Veronica V, to everyone who wanted to sound like they knew her, stood at our bathroom counter in a silk robe, curling her hair with one hand and holding her phone with the other. The screen light kept flashing across her cheek as she murmured into the speaker like she was negotiating with oxygen. I stood behind her, straightening my tie in the mirror, then stepped closer and tightened the knot on hers, the way I always did when she was rushing. It was an old habit, almost sweet if you didn't look too hard. I asked casual, like I was talking about the weather. So what's the plan this weekend? And she didn't even turn around. Dry cleaning pickup. Your mom's birthday call. We need groceries. And don't forget the building's maintenance guy is coming Monday, so clear the hallway. No fight, no heat. Just a list. Like I was her assistant and she was late for a flight. In the reflection, I watched myself nod like that was normal, like I hadn't just asked for a piece of our life and gotten a clipboard in return. From the outside, we looked solid. We had the Lincoln Park condo, the framed wedding photos, the vacations we posted once a year so people would stop asking how married life was going. Friends called us stable. People said we were the couple who had it figured out, and maybe we did for a while. But somewhere between year 7 and year 10, our marriage went from living together to managing a household. The conversations didn't stop, they just changed shape. They turned transactional. What time are we meeting the Carsons? Did you pay the HOA? Can you handle the repair guy? My name became a verb in our home. I was the one who handled things. I became the guy who made her life smoother, quieter, easier to operate. The shift didn't happen overnight. That would have been easier to point at. It was gradual, like a thermostat being lowered 1 degree every week until you wake up and realize you've been shivering for years. It started around the time V got promoted 2, maybe 3 years ago into a role that came with bigger meetings, bigger promises, bigger hungry smiles. After that, everything became about image. She started saying words like network with the kind of reverence some people reserve for prayer. She talked about caliber rooms visibility. She didn't just want success, she wanted the story of success, something that looked expensive even if it wasn't. And in that story, she always seemed to be the main character. I began noticing how decisions happened without me. Not because she explicitly banned me from the table, but because she set the table for one. She'd say I already handled it with a bright, efficient smile. She'd say, "Trust me, I've got it," and my job was to agree. I tried once to reclaim a little space. Not a revolution, just a corner of my own life. I remember it clearly because it was so small and it still hurt. We were eating takeout on the couch, some documentary muttering in the background, and I said I'd been thinking about taking a creative strategy certification, something that could open doors, maybe let me pivot, maybe even freelance one day, something that felt like growth. V laughed, not cruelly, but the way someone laughs when they think you're being adorable. Dash, she said, drawing my name out like a sigh. You're built for stability. Don't make yourself tired trying to reinvent. You're fine where you are. Fine. That word did a lot of damage in my life. It didn't sound like hate. It sounded like permission to shrink. I didn't argue. I didn't ask why her dreams were ambition and mine were exhaustion. I just nodded and let the conversation die because picking a fight would have turned me into the needy husband who couldn't handle his wife's success. So I learned to keep certain parts of myself quiet. And that's where the Japanese came in. When I was younger, I had this brush with Japan that felt like a different version of me. A semester of Japanese in college that I took on a dare and fell in love with. A short stint on a project with a Tokyo client that made me realize how language could change the air in a room. A couple of months I spent over there in my 20s that I never talk about because it sounds like a story I made up to impress people. But it wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about how alive I felt walking through a place where I wasn't anyone's husband, anyone's helper, anyone's background character. Then I got married. I got busy. I got practical. Like most people, I filed the interesting parts of myself into a drawer labeled later and shoved it shut. About 18 months ago, on a night when V had fallen asleep with her phone still lit in her hand and I couldn't quiet my mind, I downloaded a language app again, just to see what I remembered. Hiragana came back like muscle memory, then katakana, then grammar patterns I thought I'd lost. And once I started, I couldn't stop. It wasn't a hobby. It was oxygen. It was proof I could still become someone new without asking permission. I built a routine the way you build a secret. Podcasts on the L train in the morning, earbuds tucked under my jacket, the city rattling around me while a calm voice taught me the difference between polite and polite that cuts. Tutor sessions late at night while V was in her home office, catching up her door closed, her laughter occasionally slipping out through the hallway like a ghost. I practiced Keigo honorific speech because I wanted to hear the hidden meaning in sentences that sounded respectful. In Japanese, you can ruin someone with manners. You can smile and still stab. I wanted to understand that. I wanted to catch the blade before it hit me. I never told V. Not because I was plotting anything. Because I already knew what would happen. Anything that didn't serve her vision of our life got dismissed as waste. Why would you spend time on that, she'd say. Is it making you money? She didn't ask those questions to be curious. She asked them to close the door. So I kept my Japanese tucked inside me like a second heartbeat. There were other small things I didn't talk about either, but one of them matters. A few months back, after one of her work trips, I watched her change passwords. Not in a casual security update way, in a hurried, almost nervous way. Laptop first, then phone. New passcode. New face. She didn't say why, she just did it. And when tax season rolled around, she told me, "Don't touch the tax papers this year, I'm handling it." She said it like she was doing me a favor. Like I should be grateful I didn't have to worry my stable little head about it. I remember standing in our hallway late one night, coming home from the gym, seeing a stack of documents on the entry table forms, statements, envelopes, then watching her sweep them into a folder the second she heard my keys. I didn't accuse her. I didn't even bring it up. I didn't have a reason I could name. Just a pebble of unease I kept in my pocket. And then one evening in late fall, V came home early. Not early like 6:30. Early like before the sun gave up. She walked in with a kind of electricity in her shoulders, tossed her bag down and kissed my cheek like she remembered she had a husband. "Big news," she said, already smiling. "We're closing a deal with a Japanese client, like a real one. This could change everything." I said that's amazing, and I meant it because part of me still wanted to be proud of her. Part of me still thought if I loved her hard enough she might look at me like a partner again. She opened the closet and started pulling hangers like she was selecting costumes. "Next Thursday," she said. "We have a business dinner in West Loop. You're coming." I blinked. "Me, yes, you." She said it like the decision had already been signed. They're old school. They want to see stability, Marriage. It's optics. She found a suit jacket of mine and held it up like she was judging fabric quality. Dark, clean, no loud tie. And you're going to keep it simple. Simple how she looked at me for the first time that day really looked, and the look wasn't cruel. It was managerial. Smile. Be pleasant. Don't try to be funny. Don't get into work talk. Just don't say much. It landed in my chest like a quiet insult. The kind you're supposed to swallow with a grin. Then she added almost as an afterthought, "He doesn't speak much English anyway, so you'll just be bored. I'll handle the Japanese." The Japanese. She said it with pride, like she'd earned the right to speak in a room I couldn't access. She never asked if I understood. She never wondered what I did with my time when she was too busy to notice me. And that's when the decision formed in my mind, clean and cold as the lake wind outside. I nodded like the obedient husband she expected. I let her think I was just going to sit there and look supportive. But inside, I made myself a promise. Next Thursday, I would sit at that table in West Loop and I would pretend I didn't understand a word of Japanese. I would let Veronica talk the way she talked when she thought I couldn't hear. And I would finally learn exactly who I was in her story. Thursday came fast, like the city had been counting down without telling me. All day, Chicago felt sharpened. The sky stayed the color of dirty steel. The wind off the lake cut through my coat like it had a personal grudge. By the time V got home, she moved through the condo with the focused energy of someone about to step onto a stage. She didn't ask if I was ready. She inspected. "Stand up," she said. And I did. She smoothed the front of my jacket with both hands, tugged at my sleeves, checked the line of my collar like I was a mannequin she'd rented for the night. No jokes, she warned, voice low and firm. No side conversations. Don't try to talk about your work. Don't make it about you. I watched her in the mirror by the door while she adjusted her lipstick. There was a tremor under her control, something tight around the eyes. It wasn't fear of the client. It was fear of failure. Fear of losing the room. And buried inside that fear was something I recognized: she didn't trust me to help. She trusted me to stay out of the way. On the drive to West Loop, she rehearsed. Not out loud, but in fragments. A phrase here, a name there. "Sato-san," she said once, "the way you say someone important enough to alter your posture. This deal makes or breaks my year." She tapped her nails against her phone and added almost casually, "Just follow my lead." 15 minutes early, of course. We parked and walked toward the restaurant, the streetlights throwing pale pools of light onto the sidewalk. The place was sleek and quiet from the outside, the kind of restaurant where you don't hear laughter, you hear money. Inside, the air smelled clean wood citrus, something smoked. The host greeted V like she belonged there. V smiled like she did. While we waited, she opened her front-facing camera and checked her hair, then her smile, then her eyes. She looked around the room with tiny, precise movements like she was mapping the exits. I remembered something she'd said months ago after a conference: partners buy trust before they buy product. Tonight, she wasn't selling software. She was selling a version of herself. And somehow I'd been packaged as part of it. When Sato-san arrived, he moved with the calm confidence of someone who has spent a lifetime watching people try too hard. Mid-50s silver at the temples, tailored suit glasses that made his gaze feel sharper without him ever raising his voice. He bowed slightly, then offered his hand. V went first, flawless. I followed, steady, quiet. "Mr. Halloway," he said in English accent, present but not heavy. His pronunciation was careful, practiced. Not the doesn't speak much English V had warned me about. That was the first little twist of the knife. V hadn't been protecting him from me. She'd been protecting her control of the conversation. We sat. The table was set like an operating room. 2 water glasses, gleaming silverware, a candle that made everything feel intimate in the most unnatural way. The server introduced themselves with that soft, polished voice high-end places train into people. V's posture lifted a fraction higher like she'd just been plugged in. The conversation started in English, safe, shallow, the kind of talk that keeps everyone smiling while no one risks anything. "How was your flight? How do you like Chicago?" "Yes, the weather is brutal." V laughed at the right beats. I added a polite sentence or two and then stopped the obedient husband. Then as the first course came out, V switched to Japanese. Smooth, confident, more fluent than I expected. She didn't just translate words, she carried tone. She used the polite forms effortlessly, the kind of Japanese that says I belong in this room. I lowered my eyes like I was lost. I even let my face drift into that mild, supportive blankness people wear when they're out of their depth. Inside my mind stayed razor sharp, catching every honorific, every careful dodge, every choice of phrasing. Sato-san asked about market expansion. V answered with clean, assertive optimism. He asked about timelines. V gave him a story. Not a lie, exactly. More like a painting with the shadows edited out. She spoke like she was the engine behind everything. The way she spoke, you'd think no one else existed in her company. I sat there and let it happen because that's what I'd promised myself. Listen, don't flinch. Let her show you who she is when she thinks you can't understand. Halfway through, Sato-san turned his head slightly toward me and asked in Japanese, polite and direct, what I did. The question was gentle, almost generous. A door opening. I was ready to answer in English, short, respectful, the way V wanted. I took a breath. V cut in before I could make a sound. Oh, she said in Japanese, light laugh tucked into the sentence like decoration works in branding. A smaller agency. It's not anything too serious. She waved it off with a softness that felt like a pat on the head. He's more of a home person. He likes stability. My fingers tightened around my water glass. I kept my smile. I kept my eyes calm. But inside, something twisted. Sato-san nodded once, slow. He didn't interrupt her. He let her continue. V leaned in just slightly, like she was sharing a private truth with him, and she said it in Japanese with the kind of polished warmth that makes a cruel thing sound reasonable. Honestly, he's here for optics. He's great at showing up and being supportive, but I handle the decisions. For a second, the candlelight seemed to flicker louder. It wasn't just that she dismissed my work. It wasn't even that she answered for me. It was the way she erased me without hesitation, reduced me to a prop while I sat 3 feet away, like I was furniture, like my presence had a function and my voice didn't. I felt my body go still in a way that wasn't choice, the kind of stillness that happens when your brain needs time to accept what it's hearing. My face stayed composed because I'd spent years learning how to keep peace in a room I didn't control. But inside I heard something crack sharp and clean like ice splitting. Sato-san's eyes flicked to me. Just once. A pause so small anyone could have missed it. But I didn't. His gaze held a question not spoken. A reassessment. Like he was weighing the power balance at our table and finding it off. The server placed another course in front of us, breaking the moment. V kept talking still in Japanese, still smooth, still selling. Sato-san responded with polite sounds, but the warmth had cooled. The rhythm changed. Then, as if to confirm what I'd just felt, Sato-san tried again. This time in English, looking at me directly, he said, "And you, Mr. Holloway, you enjoy your work." I opened my mouth. V answered first too fast. "He likes it," she said, smiling brightly like she was translating my life for me. "He's happy where he is." Sato-san's expression didn't shift much, but his tone went more formal when he turned back to her. He asked a question about process, about decision-making structure. The kind of question that sounds like business but is really character assessment. V answered smoothly, but I could hear the slight tightening in her Japanese now. The careful over-politeness people use when they sense they're being tested. I sat through the rest of the dinner like a man watching his own obituary get drafted in real time. I smiled at the right moments. I nodded when someone glanced my way. I played my role so well that even I almost believed it. By the time we left, V was glowing. She thanked Sato-san in Japanese, perfect bow, perfect smile. He bowed back, then looked at me again. "It was a pleasure," he said in English, measured and soft. "I wish you well." The words were polite, but the way he said them felt like a message slipped under a door. In the car, V exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for 2 hours. That went great, she said, already scrolling through her phone. He's impressed, I can tell. I stared out at the dark Chicago streets sliding past the city lights smearing into lines like everything was moving too fast. My hurt didn't burn. It didn't even sting. It settled. It turned cold. And when my pain turned cold, it stopped being a wound and became a plan. V kept humming on the drive home like the city was applause and she was taking a victory lap. The heater in the car blew warm air that made the windows fog at the edges, and outside Chicago blurred into hard lines and traffic lights. She talked the whole way, not at me, just around me, like I was a quiet surface she could bounce her excitement off of. Sato-san liked the restaurant. Sato-san nodded at the projections. Sato-san smiled when she mentioned the rollout timeline. She kept repeating the phrase "good signal" the way some people say blessing, as if saying it enough times could make it permanent. I answered in small, safe pieces. That's great. Sounds promising. I'm happy for you. My voice came out even almost bored, and that was the point. Inside, I was replaying her Japanese in my head the way you replay a car accident you somehow walked away from. Not the words she said about business. The words she said about me. I sorted them like files. This one was dismissal. This one was control. This one was a warning. There was a difference between insult and strategy, and what she'd done at that table hadn't felt like a slip. It had felt practiced. When we got back to the condo, she kissed my cheek the way you tap a receipt after you sign it. I have to send a recap, she said, already walking toward her office. I need to strike while the iron's hot. Her heels clicked down the hallway. Her door closed. A second later, I heard her laptop open. Then her voice again, softer now, business smooth, like she'd slipped into a different skin. She wasn't relaxing. She was sprinting. I stood in the kitchen with my jacket still on, staring at the sink like it had answers in it. The candlelight from the restaurant was still in my eyes, that warm glow that had made everything look romantic while my marriage was being described like a product feature. I poured myself a glass of water and took 2 sips I didn't taste. Then I walked past her office door, slow, casual, like I was just heading to the bedroom, and I heard it. Not a full conversation. Just fragments, the kind that catch on your brain because you weren't supposed to hear them. Yes, I'll move it. A pause. Before the end of the month. Another pause, tighter. No, not from there. From the fund. Fund. Transfer. Before the end of the month. She didn't say our fund. She didn't say the fund. She said it like it belonged to her. Like it was a tool in her hand. I kept walking, my heartbeat steady, only because my body had already learned how to look calm while something inside it burned. In the bedroom, I took off my tie and laid it flat on the dresser the way I always did, like keeping things neat could keep my thoughts neat. I sat on the edge of the bed and let my mind move backward through the past year, not as nostalgia, but as evidence. The password changes after her trips. The way she'd angled her phone screen away from me at dinner, at brunch, at the grocery store. The way she'd stopped saying we when she talked about the future and started saying I. The taxes. Don't touch the tax papers this year, I'm handling it. The phrasing had sounded like kindness. Now it sounded like a lock clicking shut. I didn't sleep much. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the building settle. Somewhere down the hall, a neighbor's door closed softly. Outside, a siren passed and faded. V came to bed late, slid under the covers with her phone still in her hand, and exhaled like she'd run a mile. She didn't cuddle. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just fell asleep with her back to me, a barrier of warm skin that felt unreachable. The next morning, she was up before me. I heard her heels again, the familiar sound that always meant her day belonged to someone else. She moved around the condo in quick, efficient bursts, grabbing coffee, grabbing keys, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. Busy day, she said, already halfway out the door. If I'm late, don't wait up. Sure, I said. She didn't hear the tone because she didn't stay long enough to. Once she left, the condo felt too quiet, like the air was holding its breath. I walked to the kitchen, opened my laptop, and did something I hadn't done in a long time. I looked at our shared calendar. Not because I was curious about her meetings, because curiosity had finally turned into calculation. At first it looked normal. Client calls, internal syncs, A lunch here, a conference room booking there. Then I saw it tucked between legitimate meetings like it was trying to hide in plain sight. Ops sync, 30 minutes, 8:30 p.m. on a Tuesday. Another budget review at 9:00 p.m. the next week. And then a third one titled even more blandly, Catch Up, 8:45 p.m. Those hours didn't match her team's normal rhythm. Even when she worked late, it was usually from home laptop on door closed. These were off-hours events, the kind you don't want anyone asking about. I stared at the screen and felt a low, sour discomfort spread through my chest. Not proof. Not yet. But patterns were how you found the truth. I closed the calendar and told myself not to spiral. That was the trap. Spiraling turns you into the crazy spouse. Spiraling makes you confront too early with nothing but anger in your hands. If I confronted V right now, she'd look at me with that calm, superior smile and say I was insecure. She'd say I was imagining things because I couldn't handle her success. She'd delete whatever she needed to delete, and then she'd start building a story where I was the unstable one. I could see it clearly because she'd already practiced reducing me in Japanese. The only difference would be the audience. Around noon, I found the second piece without looking for it. I was walking down the hallway with a load of laundry when I heard the printer start in her office. The sound was familiar paper sliding the little mechanical hiccup as a page feeds. V never printed at home unless she had to, and lately she'd been printing more. I froze in the hallway listening, then forced my feet to keep moving. A minute later, I passed her office on my way back and saw a single page sitting in the output tray, a corner of it visible like it wanted to be seen. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But when your life starts slipping out from under you, you stop worrying about the manners of survival. I stepped in just enough to read one line near the top. Not a full document. Just a header and a number. An account confirmation, a transfer schedule. Something that mentioned a recurring movement of funds and an account name I didn't recognize. And then smaller underneath a name that wasn't mine. Her name. Veronica Holloway Primary. My stomach dropped so hard I felt it in my throat. I didn't take the paper. I didn't touch it. I didn't even breathe too loud. I backed out like I'd never been there. If I was wrong, taking it would make me the villain. If I was right, taking it would alert her. I needed her comfortable. I needed her careless. So I carried the image of that line in my head like a photograph I couldn't delete. That afternoon, V texted me from the loop. Quick, efficient, nothing personal. Can you make sure the package gets picked up downstairs? Also, don't forget we have dinner with the Carson Saturday. Then a second message almost immediately. And please don't mess with any paperwork in the office. I've got sensitive client stuff out. There it was again. The same boundary reinforced. The same lock. I sat on my couch phone in my hand and watched my own reflection in the black TV screen. I looked like a man who had everything under control. I felt like a man who'd been living inside someone else's plan. By early evening, my decision was made. Not dramatic, not emotional, practical. I needed someone who could keep me from doing the dumb thing, the loud thing, the thing that would make me lose. I needed someone who spoke fluent reality, not just fluent feelings. Renee Calder came to mind the way a lifeline comes to mind when you're already underwater. Renee and I had known each other before V, before the condo, before my life got organized into other people's priorities. We'd been close in college in that quiet, steady way that doesn't need constant maintenance. After graduation, life had scattered us, and if I was honest, V's subtle discouragement had helped. She's intense, V had said once when Renee popped up in my texts. Divorce lawyers are always looking for drama. It was said with a laugh, but the message landed. Keep your friends small. Keep your world manageable. I walked down the block to a coffee shop near the park, the kind of place with dim lamps and cracked leather chairs. I chose a seat by the window, ordered a black coffee I didn't want, and called Renee. She answered on the second ring. Dash surprise, then concern. Hey. Everything okay? The sound of her voice nearly cracked my composure. I kept it together by focusing on the steam rising from my cup. No, I said. I need your help. There was a pause, the kind where her brain shifted gears. Okay, she said, calm. Tell me what's going on. I told her about the dinner, not in a messy flood. In clipped facts. Japanese. Sato-san. V answering for me. The sentence that turned me into optics. Then the late-night call. The words I'd heard fund transfer before the end of the month. The weird calendar entries. The printer page. The constant, don't touch paperwork. Renee didn't interrupt. She listened like she was building a map. When I finished, she asked one question first. Did you confront her? No good, she said instantly, and her tone wasn't comforting. It was protective. Do not confront her, not yet. You don't do this with anger, Dash. You do this with a paper trail. I don't have proof, I said, and I hated how small that sounded. I just heard you have a starting point, she cut in gently. That's not nothing. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to create a timeline. You're going to gather every financial document you can access legally. Statements, taxes, insurance, mortgage, retirement, any property records, anything that shows money moving, and you're going to keep acting normal. Normal, I repeated. Yes, she said. Because the second she senses you're onto her, she will sanitize her life. People like that don't panic first. They erase first. My hands tightened around the coffee cup. People like that. Renee let that sit for half a second, then asked, what exactly did she say about money at the dinner? My mind snapped back to the table, to V's smooth Japanese, to the way her voice had softened when she thought she was safe. I picked out the phrases that mattered, not the direct ones, the implied ones. How she spoke about control. How she spoke about convenience. How she spoke like I was a variable she'd already solved for. Renee was quiet again. Then she said, Dash. If she's moving assets intentionally, this isn't just about your feelings being hurt. This is about you being boxed out, financially, legally, socially. And if she paints you as the uninvolved husband, the one who doesn't understand, you could end up fighting for access to money that was yours the whole time. The air in the coffee shop felt thinner. So what do I do first, I asked. Tonight, she said, you don't do anything that leaves a trace. Tomorrow you start collecting what you can, and you call me again with what you find. We do this clean. I stared out the window at Lincoln Park, at people walking dogs and couples holding hands like the world was simple. I feel like an idiot, I admitted quietly. Like I've been standing in the same room with my life and not seeing it. Renee's voice softened just enough. You're not an idiot. You're a decent person who assumed your spouse was also decent. That's not stupidity. That's trust. And trust can be used against you. But it can also be the reason you win if you get smart now. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time watching the streetlights click on one by one. My phone buzzed with a text from V running late. Don't wait up. I typed back, no problem. Hope your day went well. My thumbs didn't shake. On the walk home, the wind hit my face hard enough to sting, and the sting felt like clarity. The night I learned Japanese, I thought I was saving a part of myself. I didn't realize I was training for this, because from the moment I heard her talk about me like I was furniture, I understood one thing with brutal certainty. If I was still going to be treated like a prop in her story, then I was going to become the kind of prop that could bring the whole stage down. The next few days were a performance. Not the kind where you take a bow at the end, but the kind where one wrong expression can get you killed. I woke up at my usual time, made coffee, the way V liked it, asked her how the day before had gone with the exact level of interest a good husband is expected to show. Everything okay after dinner, I asked once, like I was referring to the West Loop night in general, not the sentence that had turned my blood to ice. V didn't look up from her phone. Great, she said. Really great. I told you. Just needed you to be supportive. Supportive. The word sat between us like a leash. I smiled, kissed her forehead, and watched her leave. Inside me, something had shifted. I wasn't trying to win her back. I wasn't trying to prove my worth. I was collecting facts. I started paying attention to tiny things the way you do when you suspect there's a leak in your ceiling and you're trying to find the first drop. How she angled her phone away when she texted. How her laptop snapped shut the second I walked by. How her tone changed when the subject was money, like she was stepping onto a protected floor. Renee told me I needed time to gather without looking suspicious, so I built myself a reason. I emailed my boss and asked to work remote for a few days. I blamed it on a heavy deliverable and the need for uninterrupted focus. That was true enough to pass, and it gave me cover to be home without it looking like I was monitoring my wife. If V asked, I kept it simple. "I'm trying to knock something out," I said. "Clients being picky." "Good," she replied, barely listening. "Just don't get in my way this week." I started with the quietest thing I could touch without setting off alarms, the joint account. Not because it was the only place money lived, but because it was the place she assumed she could hide inside. I sat at my desk with my laptop open, the condo silent, the hum of the refrigerator the only witness, and logged into our banking app. Seeing the numbers felt oddly intimate, like opening a drawer in someone's bedside table. I downloaded statements as PDFs month by month, then saved them in a plain folder with a boring name. I didn't upload them to cloud yet. Renee had warned me about leaving digital footprints at home. First collect, then transfer safely. Once I had 3 years of statements, I did what Renee had told me to do. I made a timeline. I didn't look at the total balance first. I looked for movement, patterns, anything that repeated with the confidence of a habit. That's when I saw it. A small transfer automated every month, sometimes twice. Not huge. The kind of amount you shrug at when you assume it's a subscription or a bill. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Always the same kind of reference code. Always to an account name that was abbreviated just enough to be vague. At first I told myself it could be innocent, an investment, a savings vehicle, something she set up and forgot to explain. But then I totaled it. 8 months, 10 months, a year. The number made my mouth go dry. It wasn't one dramatic theft. It was a steady siphon. Quiet as breathing. Money leaving our life and going somewhere I'd never seen. I took screenshots, then downloaded the transfer confirmations where I could. I wrote down the dates, the amounts, the reference codes. I didn't click contact support. I didn't message the bank through the app. I didn't do anything that would generate a notification V might see if she checked account alerts. I was learning to move like smoke. That night, V came home energized and irritated the way she always did when she'd spent all day performing competence for strangers. She talked about alignment and pipeline while she kicked off her heels. I listened like a good spouse, asking a question here and there, keeping my tone light. Then I set my first small test. A soft trap. Something that wouldn't start a war if she was innocent, but would tell me everything if she wasn't. So I said casually as I rinsed a plate, we should probably look at year-end stuff soon. Taxes, savings, all that. I can take some of it off your plate. V's head snapped up too fast. It wasn't anger. It was reflex. "No," she said immediately, then softened it into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I already have an advisor helping me with everything. It's handled." With everything I kept my voice gentle. Curious, not accusing. She waved a hand like she was brushing lint off a blazer. "Dash, you don't really understand that stuff. You get stressed out. Let me carry it." The phrasing hit me so hard I almost laughed. It was the same tone she'd used at the dinner table, just translated. "The same story you don't understand, I decide." I nodded. "Okay," I said. "If you're sure." V relaxed immediately, as if my agreement was the only proof she needed that I hadn't changed. She went into her office and shut the door. As soon as she did, I moved to the next step. The drawer. The paperwork she'd told me not to touch. I didn't rip it open. I didn't rummage like a thief. I opened it with care like a librarian. I looked for things that would plausibly be there: insurance policies, tax returns, HOA documents, mortgage statements. I photographed pages quickly, then placed them back exactly where they belonged. I took my time not to make noise. I listened for her footsteps. That's when I found the second gut punch. A printed confirmation letter for an account I'd never heard of. Her name listed as the account holder. An opening date that lined up almost perfectly with her promotion 2 years ago. Not last week. Not after the dinner. This had been in motion for a long time. The dinner wasn't the beginning. It was a checkpoint. My hands stayed steady while I took the photo. My mind didn't. Because once you realize someone has been planning around you for years, you stop asking if you're paranoid and start asking how far the plan goes. The next morning, while V showered, her phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't touch it. I wasn't going to become that guy. But the screen lit up and I caught a name in the preview. A first and last name. Not a pet name. Not a friend nickname. A workplace name. Maya Klein. The message was short. Something like confirming tonight's ops sync. Same place. My heart thumped once heavy, then leveled out. Ops sync. There it was again, crawling out of the calendar and into real life. V came out of the bathroom and flipped the phone over in one smooth motion, too smooth like she'd done it before. "I'm late," she said, and moved past me without meeting my eyes. I waited until she left, then I sat down and did the one thing Renee had told me to watch for Beyond Money narrative. The story V was building about me, the way she framed me to other people. Because money could be divided in court, but a story could poison everything. A story could make a judge think I was uninvolved. A story could make her company think I was unstable. A story could make mutual friends stop calling. That afternoon, while I was working in a coffee shop near my agency downtown, I saw an email pop into the shared inbox we still used for household stuff. It was a follow-up from Sato-san's assistant, polite and concise, summarizing the dinner and next steps. My eyes went straight to one line. They wanted a short follow-up meeting before finalizing, not just with V, with both of us. To better understand long-term stability and partnership support, it said in clean corporate English. I felt a strange jolt in my chest, something between hope and dread. Then I heard the condo door open in my mind, V coming home, seeing that email, realizing the client wanted to see me as a person. I could picture her reaction before it happened. When I got home that evening, the email was gone. Not moved. Not archived. Gone. V was in her office door, half closed, voice low. Yes, she was saying we'll keep it focused on the business side. I didn't ask what she was talking about. I didn't let my face change. I poured myself water and went to the bedroom like I was tired. Later, when she finally came to bed, she fell asleep fast. The kind of sleep people get when they've been lying all day and their body is relieved to stop performing. I lay there in the dark and opened my notes app, screen dimmed as low as it would go. I wrote down everything: the automated transfers, the account confirmation with her name, the opening date, Maya Klein's message preview, the deleted follow-up email from Sato-san, the ops sync meetings at weird hours. I wrote it all in plain language with dates because memory is slippery when fear is involved. The next morning I met Renee in River North. She didn't offer sympathy first. She offered structure. I slid my phone across the table and showed her the photos, the bank patterns, the account letter, the dates. I told her about Maya's name popping up. I told her about Sato-san's email and how it disappeared. Renee's jaw tightened in that way lawyers have when they're seeing a case form in front of them. "Okay," she said finally. "This isn't just a spouse being controlling. This looks like intentional separation, maybe concealment." "What does that mean for me?" I asked, and my voice was calm enough to scare even me. "It means you don't do anything impulsive," she said. "You keep gathering. We build the timeline. We document patterns. And we make sure she can't rewrite reality once she realizes you're not asleep anymore." She leaned forward. "Two priorities now. One, identify where those automated transfers are going. Two, figure out what ops sync actually is. Because if that's money and a person tied together, it changes everything." I left her office with a list for the next 48 hours, specific and relentless. Download more statements. Photograph more documents. Keep acting normal. Don't tip the board. That night, V ate dinner across from me and scrolled on her phone like I wasn't there. She laughed at something on screen, then caught my gaze and smiled, sweet and empty. "Long week," she said. "Yeah," I answered. "Long week." She went to bed early. Her breathing evened out within minutes. I sat in the living room with the lights off, the city glow leaking through the blinds, and I understood the truth I'd been avoiding since West Loop. I wasn't just investigating a marriage. I was investigating a plan to remove me from my own life quietly, politely, with paperwork and smiles. And if I was going to survive it, I couldn't be the man she thought would keep nodding. I had to be the man who listened, documented, and struck without warning. The first time I called the bank, I did it from my car with the engine off and the heater barely running. The parking lot outside a grocery store in Lincoln Park isn't dramatic, but that's the point. Most disasters don't come with music. They come with ordinary backgrounds, so you don't recognize them until you're already inside. My hands were steady on the steering wheel while I waded through the automated menu, pressed the numbers, verified my identity, and forced my voice into something neutral. No anger, no accusation, just a husband asking a question he had every right to ask. "I'm a joint account holder," I said when a representative finally picked up. "I need details on an automated recurring transfer coming out of our account. I want the receiving account identifier, and I need any documentation you have on when and how the transfer instruction was set up." There was a pause while she typed. The faint click of keys. The kind of sound that makes your stomach clench because it means the truth is being pulled from a system that doesn't care about your feelings. "Okay," she said. "I see the recurring transfers you're referring to. They were established 8 months ago." My throat went tight. "By who as a joint owner I can confirm that the instruction originated from an authenticated device," she said carefully, like she'd said this line before. "It was verified using a method tied to an additional phone number on file." "An additional phone number," I repeated, keeping my tone flat even as something cold slid through my ribs. "What phone number? I can't provide the full number," she said, "but I can confirm it does not match the phone number currently listed for you." A single sentence delivered politely changed the shape of my life. Because that wasn't my wife managing finances. That wasn't my wife forgot to explain an investment. That was my wife setting up a pipeline using a verification method I didn't control, sending money to a destination that didn't list me as an owner. Intentional, designed, quiet. "Is the receiving account a joint account?" I asked. "No," she said. "The destination account is not listed as jointly held by both parties. It appears to be under a separate ownership profile." I stared through my windshield at a man loading bags into his trunk, unaware that my marriage was being dismantled in real time. "I need a copy of whatever confirmation you can provide," I said. "Set up date, transfer schedule, and the destination identifier." She told me what they could and couldn't send, which forms I'd need, what would arrive by email, and what required a request code. I wrote down the code with the same hand I used to take notes in meetings at work, like this was just another deliverable. When I hung up, the silence in the car felt heavier than the winter air. I didn't call V. I didn't text her. I didn't confront. Confrontation would have been theater, and she was better at theater than I was. I drove straight to River North and walked into Renee's office with my jaw set and my stomach hollow. Renee took one look at my face and didn't waste time on small talk. "Tell me," she said. I slid my notebook across her desk with the request code and the details I could legally obtain. I told her exactly what the representative said about the authenticated device and the additional phone number. I watched Renee's expression tighten, not shocked, not emotional, just focused. "That's important," she said, "because it shows you didn't authorize it and she created a pathway you don't control." She pulled out a legal pad and started drawing what she called the map. She wrote V's name on one side, mine on the other, and between us, she drew the joint account. Then she drew arrows out of it, labeling each line with what we already knew. Recurring transfers, unknown destination, separate ownership, possible advisor, possible shell accounts. "Now," she said, tapping her pen against the paper, "we assume there are other branches. People don't create one pipeline and stop. They build a system." She asked for everything. Pay stubs, insurance policies, the condo mortgage docs, retirement accounts, any investment statements I could access. She asked if we had any property beyond our condo. I almost laughed. "Not that I know of," I said, and the words tasted bitter. "That's exactly why we're going to find out," she replied. That night, I went home and played the husband. V was on the couch, laptop open, a spreadsheet on her screen that she snapped closed the second she saw me. Long day, she said, voice sweet in that way that meant she was watching me. Same, I said. Clients being a pain. She studied me for half a second longer than normal. You've been working at home a lot, she said. Not a question, a probe. Deadline, I replied, shrugging. It's easier to focus here. Uh-huh, she said, and the sound carried a warning. Then she smiled and walked over and smoothed my collar the way she had before the dinner. The gesture looked affectionate to anyone else. To me, it felt like someone checking a tag to make sure the merchandise hadn't been swapped. 2 days later, I found the second branch. It came disguised as something boring, because that's how these things always hide. I was looking through documents we kept for the condo HOA letters insurance renewals when I saw a printed email thread tucked behind a stack of unrelated papers. It wasn't addressed to me. It wasn't even meant to be in that drawer. It had likely been dropped there in a hurry. The subject line was bland closing timeline. I scanned it quickly just enough to make my skin go tight. It referenced a unit number, a deposit, and a property management company I didn't recognize. A condo, not ours. Another address. Another set of numbers. My pulse hammered once, then steadied. I took a photo, then another, and put the paper back exactly as I found it. In the bathroom mirror later, I looked at my own face and realized I wasn't shocked anymore. I was angry, yes, but shock had burned out. Shock is what you feel when your life collapses suddenly. This was something else. This was realizing your life had been quietly rearranged while you were still living in it. Renee confirmed what my gut already knew. If she put down a deposit or bought a property in her name only using marital funds, that becomes part of the marital estate, she said. But we need documentation. We need proof of where the money came from. So I started tracking V the way you track a storm, not by chasing it, by watching patterns and pressure changes. I used public things, building logs, the timestamps on the door camera feed that the condo association provided residents. I noted what time she left, what time she returned, and how those times lined up with her calendar's ops sync. I didn't follow her car like a desperate man. I followed the timeline like an investigator. One Tuesday, she left at 7:40 p.m., wearing a fitted coat and a kind of lipstick she didn't wear for normal meetings. She returned close to midnight. No dinner smell on her. No tired eyes. Just that slightly flushed look people get when they've been somewhere they wanted to be. The next morning, I found a charge. Not on the joint account this time, but on a printed summary sheet she'd left on the kitchen counter by mistake, one of those quick overviews advisors generate full of categories and numbers. My eyes caught a line that made my chest tighten. A hotel, near the Loop, dated the night of ops sync. The charge didn't list who was with her. It didn't say Maya. It didn't have to. It said enough. A late-night meeting didn't require a hotel room. Not in your own city. Not when you lived 20 minutes away. I didn't touch the paper. I didn't react. I snapped a photo as I walked past my phone, held low like I was checking the time. Then I went to the sink and ran water over a plate I wasn't actually washing because I needed the sound to keep my breathing normal. That afternoon, I checked another channel Renee had suggested, one most people forget exists until it ruins them: loyalty accounts, travel points, reservation apps, anything tied to an email address or phone number. We still had one household email for building notices and shared subscriptions. V hadn't bothered to separate that yet. There it was, a confirmation email sitting in the inbox like a confession, not explicit, not romantic, just details. A reservation. A room type that implied 2 people. A late check-in time. A location that matched the charge I'd seen. And at the bottom, the kind of line you don't notice until you're looking for it: guest name M. Klein. Maya. My hands went cold on the keyboard. The world narrowed to that single initial and last name typed in clean black letters like it was nothing. I closed the laptop and sat back staring at the wall, waiting for my body to catch up to what my brain already understood. It wasn't just money. It wasn't just control. It was a double life built out of spreadsheets and polite smiles. That night, V watched me more closely. She asked questions that sounded like concern but landed like surveillance. "You're quiet lately," she said as we ate. "You okay?" "Just tired," I replied. "Work's heavy. You've been on your phone a lot." she said, slicing her food with precise little movements. Emails, I said, not looking up. She set her fork down. Dash, she began tone softening into something almost sweet. I need you steady right now. This deal is huge. Sato-san likes stability, family support. If you start acting weird, it reflects on me. There it was, the leverage, not love, reputation. I nodded like I understood. I've got you, I said. Her shoulders loosened by a fraction. She believed the mask again. 2 days later, she dropped the next move on the table like it was a gift. We were standing in the kitchen and she was scrolling her phone with that casual authority she used when she wanted something to feel inevitable. This weekend, she said, we're meeting my financial advisor. I kept my face neutral. Why? So we can get organized, she said too quickly. Sign a few things, clean up some accounts, make next year easier. She smiled and it looked warm until you saw the impatience behind it. It'll be quick. Just paperwork. Paperwork. The word hit like a bell. Because paperwork was how she moved people without leaving fingerprints. Paperwork was how she turned choices into signatures. Sure, I said, forcing my voice to stay easy. Whatever you need. V's eyes searched mine for a crack. She didn't find one. She kissed my cheek satisfied. Thank you, she said. This is important. As soon as she walked away, I pulled my phone out and texted Renee with hands that finally shook a little. I told her about the advisor meeting. I told her about the hotel charge and the confirmation email with Maya's name. I told her the recurring transfers were tied to an authenticated device that wasn't mine. Renee's reply came back immediately. Do not sign anything. Play along. We'll plan. I stared at the message until the words blurred. Then I looked across the condo at the closed door of V's office. She was speeding up. Bringing paperwork into the open meant she was confident enough to push. It meant she believed she'd built the runway, and all I had to do was walk onto it. If she was accelerating, I had to accelerate smarter. Because when two people run toward the same finish line, only one of them gets to decide what happens there. The advisor's office was in a glass building that smelled like new carpet and artificial calm. Everything about it was designed to make you lower your guard. Soft chairs, neutral art. A bowl of mints on the table like this was hospitality instead of strategy. V walked in like she owned the place, heels sharp on the floor, smile already loaded. She introduced me with that same polished tone she'd used with Sato-san, like she was presenting a product with a clean warranty. This is my husband Dash, she said. He's supportive. The advisor, mid-40s, crisp suit handshake that lasted half a second too long, smiled at me like I was a formality. V did most of the talking. She talked fast, dense, with terminology moving from account types to allocations to efficiency like she was trying to outrun questions. I sat back and listened, and it felt like West Loop all over again, just without the sushi and candlelight. Same posture, same script, same implication that my job was to nod. Then the paperwork came out. A neat stack, clipped together tabs labeled in bright colors. The advisor slid it toward me with a pen, the universal gesture of legal consent. This will streamline everything, he said. We're just updating access, consolidating, making sure you're both aligned for the upcoming year. I flipped the first page and saw enough phrases to know what the trap was. Authorization, consent, transfer permissions, a structure that would move money without needing my signature later. The kind of document that lets someone say you agreed when you didn't understand what you were agreeing to. I'm not signing today, I said calmly. V's smile tightened like a pulled thread. Dash. She said sweet but sharp, it's standard. I still want to read it, I replied. I'm allowed to read what I sign. The advisor chuckled lightly like I was being cute. Of course, it's just V cut him off. Not in an obvious way. In a way that sounded like concern. He gets anxious about money, she said, looking at the advisor like she was apologizing for me. He doesn't really understand the mechanics. If you explain too much, he spirals. Just keep it simple. There it was. Out loud. In English. In front of a third party. My face stayed still, but something inside me went perfectly quiet. Because the sentence wasn't about me. It was about the story she needed other people to believe. I was the nervous husband. The simple one. The one who didn't get it. The one who needed her to manage the world for him. I looked at V and held her gaze, not angrily, just steadily, and I watched her blink first. "I'm not spiraling," I said, voice even. "I'm reading." V's expression shifted. A flicker of annoyance slipped through the polish. "We don't have time for this," she said, the sweetness draining. "This is for our future." "Our future," I repeated, letting the words hang. "Yes," she pressed. "For the plan. For next year. For what I'm building." What she meant was clear for what she was building without me. "I'll take copies," I said, and I held out my hand for the packet. The advisor hesitated, then slid the stack toward me. V's eyes narrowed. "Why are you making this hard?" she asked, voice low now. "I'm not," I said. "I'm being careful." "Careful," she scoffed. "Or controlling." The projection was so clean it almost impressed me. We left with the papers in my bag and tension in the air like static. In the elevator, V stood too close, her perfume sharp, her jaw clenched. "You embarrassed me," she hissed under her breath. "I didn't say anything," I replied. "You didn't cooperate," she shot back. "There's a difference." Back in the condo that night, she played a new game. The guilt game. She poured herself a glass of wine, didn't offer me one, and paced the living room like she was rehearsing a speech. "Sato-san values family stability," she said, not looking at me. "He likes to know a partner's home life is solid." I stayed on the couch, my hands folded, the paperwork heavy in my bag. "Okay," I said. "If you mess this up," she continued, voice softening into something almost plaintive, "you're destroying what I've worked for. Do you understand that everything we have depends on this? Everything we have." It would have hit harder if I hadn't seen the transfers, the hidden account, the condo deposit, the hotel reservation with Maya's name. "Everything we have," she said, while she siphoned money out of our joint life like it was an expense. "I'm not messing anything up," I said. "I just want to understand what I'm signing." V turned eyes sharp. "You don't trust me," she said, and she made it sound like a crime. I held my face neutral. "I'm trying to be responsible," I replied. She stared at me for a long moment, then walked away, her footsteps hard on the floor. "Fine," she said. "Do what you want." But the tone promised consequences. That night I started doing what Renee had told me to do, document the narrative. I didn't need dramatic recordings. I needed patterns. I saved V's texts where she called me anxious, uninformed, difficult. I wrote down her exact phrasing from the advisor's office. I noted how she used Sato-san like a weapon. I kept it all in one place with dates and times because feelings can be argued with, but timestamps don't flinch. The next morning I got an email that made my blood run colder than any bank statement. It wasn't sent to our household inbox. It came to my personal email, the kind V didn't monitor because she didn't think she needed to. The sender was Sato-san's assistant, and the subject line was polite, almost boring follow-up inquiry. The message was brief. They were grateful for dinner. They wanted to better understand the broader support structure for long-term collaboration. They would appreciate a short conversation with me at my convenience, not through V. Not with V copied, directly to me. I read it twice, then a third time, because the implication felt unreal. Sato-san had noticed. Or at least he'd noticed enough to step around V and check the part of the story she'd tried to keep silent. It was a door opening, and it was also a blade because if V found out, she would clamp down harder. I forwarded the email to Renee with a single line. He reached out to me directly. Renee called within minutes. "Don't respond yet," she said. "Not until we decide how to use it. But save everything. That's proof she doesn't control the narrative completely." That afternoon, V came home early, and it wasn't the excited early, like when she announced the Japanese deal. It was the tense early, the kind that means something happened at work. She barely looked at me. She went straight to her office, closed the door, and I heard her on the phone again, fast-coded, urgent. "We need to keep this contained," she said at one point. "No, he can't be involved." I didn't know if she meant Sato-san, the advisor, Maya, me, maybe all of it. Later she came out with her smile back on, too smooth, like it had been repainted. She walked over and touched my shoulder. "Hey," she said, voice gentle. "I've been under a lot of pressure. I don't want us fighting. I nodded. Me neither. Then sign, she said, and the gentleness vanished on the last word. I stood up slowly. I'm not signing until my attorney looks at it, I said. The silence that followed felt like stepping into an empty room and realizing you're not alone. V's face tightened, then rearranged itself into something colder. Your attorney, she repeated like the phrase offended her. So you've been talking to someone. I didn't answer. Not because I was scared, because I was done volunteering information. She stepped closer. Let me be clear, she said, voice low, controlled. If you don't sign, I will make sure everyone understands why this is hard. I will make it very clear who has been carrying this marriage, who contributes, who has been holding us back. Holding us back. The way she said it, you'd think I'd been dragging her through mud instead of building a home around her ambition. I looked at her, and for the first time I didn't feel love in the room. I felt negotiation. I felt a hostile takeover dressed up like marriage. That night I went back to Renee's office with the advisor packet in my bag and V's threat still ringing in my ears. Renee spread the papers out on her desk, reading quickly, eyes narrowing at specific clauses. This is exactly what I thought she said. Consent language, authorization. It's designed to limit your objections later. Can she do it without me? I asked. Not if we move first, Renee said. She slid her chair closer and lowered her voice like we were discussing something sacred. Here's what we're going to do. We pick a morning. We file for divorce and we deliver an evidence package to her company's compliance department the same day, the same window. So she can't sanitize her accounts, can't spin the story, can't go to work first and frame you. My stomach tightened. That's nuclear. She's already gone nuclear, Renee replied. She just did it quietly. We're simply making it visible. Renee outlined what she needed from me to make the package heavy enough to land. A link between Maya and the money, or Maya and the hotel nights, or Maya and a conflict of interest pattern at work. Something that took this from ugly marriage behavior to documented misconduct. When I left Renee's office, the city felt different. Not hostile, clear, like the skyline had edges again. At home, V was asleep on her side of the bed, face calm, breathing easy. She looked like someone who believed the outcome was already decided. I stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment, not with tenderness, but with the detached focus of a man studying an opponent. I realized then that the worst night of my life hadn't been West Loop. West Loop was just when I heard the truth. The worst moment was always the one right before you strike back, when the person who's been controlling you thinks you're still under their hand. Friday morning arrived with the kind of cold that makes the city feel sharpened. I was already seated in Renee's conference room before most of Chicago had finished its first cup of coffee. The blinds were half open, letting in a thin gray light that flattened everything it touched. On the table in front of me were 3 stacks of paper aligned with a precision that felt almost ceremonial. The divorce petition fully prepared and ready to file. The evidence package tabbed and indexed by timeline, transaction, and correspondence. And a short clinical summary Renee had drafted reconstructing the exact language Veronica had used in Japanese at the dinner in West Loop, stripped of emotion and written the way lawyers write facts when they want them to survive contact with reality. I didn't feel nervous. That surprised me. Somewhere between watching money disappear from our joint account and hearing my wife reduce me to a decorative object in another language, fear had burned off. What replaced it wasn't rage. It was order. When you finally understand the system you're trapped in, the panic gives way to logistics. At 8:42, Renee's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, then slid it toward me without comment. The last piece had landed. A hotel invoice forwarded from an internal system routed through a corporate travel tool tied to an email ending in my wife's company domain. The reservation listed 2 guests. The billing code matched a project Maya Klein had oversight on. Same date as an ops sync. Same location. Same pattern. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse than that. It was clean. That's the bridge, Renee said quietly. Person to place, place to money, money to corporate resources. At 9 or on the dot, she sent the compliance submission through the company's official reporting channel. No accusations, no adjectives. Just facts, attachments, logs, and a request for internal review. She CC'd HR as protocol required and documented the transmission like it was a surgical procedure. This isn't revenge, she reminded me, though I hadn't suggested otherwise. This is containment. At 9:30, the divorce petition was served at Veronica's office in the Loop. I wasn't there. That was intentional. If I'd been present, she would have turned it into a scene, something loud and emotional that let her reassert control through chaos. Instead, the papers arrived quietly, handed to her by someone who didn't care about her title or her tone. I put my phone on silent and left it face down on the table. By 10:20, Renee's inbox chimed again. She read the message once, then a second time, and her shoulders lifted slightly like a weight had shifted. They've acknowledged receipt, she said, and they've restricted her access to several systems pending review. That was the moment everything tilted. Not because it was punishment, but because it removed her favorite weapon. Veronica's power had always come from speed, from acting before anyone else realized a move was being made. Now she was frozen in place, unable to clean, delete, or rewrite. My phone began to vibrate against the table, a steady insect hum that wouldn't stop. I didn't look at it at first. Renee did. She noted the time, the frequency, the missed calls stacking one on top of another. When it finally paused, she checked the voicemail log and raised an eyebrow. "It's escalating," she said. I flipped the phone over and saw the list. Missed calls, texts, voicemails. The messages shifted tone exactly the way Renee had predicted. Confusion, anger, panic, pleading, accusation, then back to pleading. Each one felt like a pulse from a life I'd already stepped out of. Around 11, she changed tactics. She didn't just call me. She called people around me, a mutual friend, someone I'd worked with years ago. She tried to plant the idea that I was unstable, that I was sabotaging her career, that I'd imagined things. Renee instructed me not to respond, not to correct, not to defend. Let her build the record, she said. It won't help her. By early afternoon, word filtered back through professional channels that the company had widened the internal review. Maya's name had come up. Certain expenses were being questioned. The phrase conflict of interest had entered the conversation. That was the point of no return. Renee leaned back in her chair and studied me. "You shouldn't go home alone," she said. "Not today." We arranged for an escort, someone neutral, someone official enough to keep the temperature down. I didn't argue. Control once taken away makes people unpredictable. Just before we left her office, my phone lit up again, this time with a message from an unfamiliar number. The text was short, polite, written in careful Japanese. A representative connected to Sato-san requesting a direct conversation with me, specifically to clarify concerns about transparency and family representation. I showed it to Renee. She nodded once. "We don't answer yet," she said, "but we keep it." I stepped out into the cold with a set of keys that no longer felt like mine, walked down familiar streets that suddenly looked staged, and rode the elevator up to the condo with someone standing quietly beside me. The hallway smelled the same as it always had. Clean, neutral, empty. The hardest part wasn't the paperwork or the phone calls. It was the moment my hand closed around the doorknob, knowing that on the other side of it was the first face-to-face meeting after her world stopped bending to her will. Veronica was already there. She looked like someone who had run out of scripts. Her hair wasn't quite right. Her blazer was on the chair instead of hanging neatly. The apartment felt charged like the air before a storm. She started talking the second I stepped inside. Explanations poured out of her fast and tangled. Misunderstandings, overreactions, corporate politics. She said my name the way she used to, like it was supposed to pull me back into position. "You've destroyed everything," she said, then immediately softened. "I was trying to protect us." I listened without interrupting. Not because I was passive, but because I didn't need to win the conversation. I needed it to end. She shifted tactics when she realized emotion wasn't working. She leaned on nostalgia, on shared memories, on the version of us that existed before she started treating life like a hierarchy. Then she tried justification. "I said what I said at dinner because that's how business works," she snapped. You flatter them. You simplify things. I looked at her and asked one question calmly. If that was all it was, why did you say the same thing about me in front of the advisor? She froze. That wasn't Japanese, I continued. You didn't need to impress anyone then. She scoffed, trying to recover. You didn't even understand the Japanese. You're imagining things. That was the moment I'd been waiting for. I answered her in Japanese briefly, precisely using the same level of politeness she'd used at the dinner. The sentence wasn't dramatic. It didn't need to be. It was enough. The color drained from her face. She stared at me like I'd changed shape in front of her. Then anger surged in sharp and ugly. She accused me of spying, of invading her privacy, of stalking her movements. Renee stepped forward and ended that line of attack with a reminder of what had been gathered legally and what had already been documented. The threats deflated. I packed a suitcase without rushing. Each folded shirt felt like reclaiming a square inch of myself. Veronica alternated between crying and lashing out. I didn't match either rhythm. She tried one last time, telling me I'd get nothing, that she'd planned for this, that she made more money and had better lawyers. Renee corrected her with facts. About joint funds, about unauthorized transfers, about attempted coercion, about consequences. Months passed the way months always do when a life is being dismantled carefully. Through filings, through negotiations, through accountants tracing money and naming it properly. The outcome wasn't cinematic. It was fair. Assets were divided, accounts disclosed, hidden structures exposed. The company's investigation concluded quietly, but decisively. Veronica lost the role she'd built her identity around. Maya was removed. No press. No apology. Just the end of a narrative that couldn't survive scrutiny. I did eventually speak with Sato-san. Not as an accessory. As myself. He valued steadiness. He valued clarity. He valued someone who understood that respect isn't performative. The work that followed wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. Weeks later, an email arrived from Veronica. A brief apology. A request for forgiveness. I didn't respond. Some chapters don't close with shouting. They close with silence. I still study Japanese. Not as armor anymore. As language. As choice. What I learned in quiet saved me, not because it impressed anyone, but because it gave me back my voice. And that's where my story rests. Not with a victory, not with a perfect ending, but with a quieter kind of truth. Some moments don't come to destroy us. They come to wake us up. They show us where we've been silent, where we've made ourselves smaller, where we kept the peace at the cost of our own voice. And when that realization arrives, it hurts. But it also opens a door we didn't know we were allowed to walk through. When we look at stories like this, maybe the most human thing we can do is slow down and hold a little compassion for the person who spoke the words, for the person who heard them, for all the versions of ourselves who stayed too long because leaving felt scarier than enduring. Life rarely gives us clean villains or clean heroes. It gives us people trying, failing, protecting themselves in ways that sometimes wound others without fully seeing it. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of a moment when you realized your worth a little too late or just in time, you're not alone here. This space exists so we can listen quietly, honestly, without judgment. If you'd like to be part of that, you're welcome to subscribe and stay with us. And if you feel like it, you can leave a few lines in the